Welcome to the Recruitment Team Management course. Today is the first of 13 sessions, an audit of the company's recruitment system. This is typically where a recruitment manager starts. For example, when I was hired as the head of recruitment and onboarding at STB TV channel, I was asked to do an audit. Basically, look at what's there and suggest what can be done with it. This is the starting point for a recruitment manager's job. It's standard practice. Why you need to take a course like this? Recruitment leaders who can build an effective recruiting team are always worth their weight in gold. They're the most in-demand specialists because any business begins with recruitment. Every time a company starts to grow faster, which happens when investors invest or there's market success, the company urgently needs people. And companies with their old recruitment systems tend to fail. Yes, I've seen this many times. I experienced it at Alpha Bank when I worked there during a period when the bank grew rapidly from 200 employees to 6,000 in just 3 to 4 years. That's a 30-fold increase in staff. I saw it at STB TV channel. When I arrived, there were 700 employees, and after a couple of years, it was 2,500 employees. When I came to Wargaming, I saw this in retrospect. When I joined, there were about 4,500 employees, but a few years earlier, the company had only about 200 employees. I saw the same thing at another company. I joined when there were 50, and we grew to about 110 in 6 months. So anyway, I've seen it happen. When a company needs to accelerate its growth, not just grow by 10% annually, but needs to increase by 30%, 50%, sometimes 100%, all the old systems in place stop coping. And usually at that point, the company looks for a head of recruitment who will come in and build a new system. Without finding this person, the company actually cannot grow from a business standpoint, because without people growth, well, you can only grow so much. But beyond that, it's all about the people. No people, no one to work. So really, during periods of growth, especially during economic cycles of economic growth, growth can occur in any company regardless of the external environment. But when the whole global economy grows, many companies start to grow. And since we're in 2025, 2026, we expect a global economic recovery, we expect growth, so these recruitment managers will be in particularly high demand, because for several years before that, all companies did was lay people off. This is the course website, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've already mentioned a few companies. I actually worked at Alpha Bank ahead of Superactive Growth. I worked at STB TV channel, where I built the recruitment system. I worked at Wargaming, I worked at ADA, consulted for PeopleForce, and then created an academy and the PPHR product, which I'll talk about a little later. There are useful tools for HR there, including checklists with recommendations. So, during these 15 years of work, I've participated in various contests, nominations, all kinds of competitions, and many where I took first or one of the top places. These are various diplomas I've received as a participant in tough contests, as a conference speaker, and all sorts of rankings and other things. I've also passed 3 international exams from different companies and organizations, including Human Capital Institute, SRM, and HCI. The academy I founded in 2012 actually held its first online webinar. During this period, the academy has also achieved great results, including several national awards and YouTube's Silver Button, which is also an academy achievement. In my work, I rely on best practices. When I tell you about something in this course, it will always be a combination of my personal experience, which I've accumulated both from working inside companies and from consulting, because companies approach me annually and hire me as an advisor. That is, they buy consultations. Some take 3, some take 10, some regularly for a year, and they ask me to build either recruitment, HR, or something else. Over these 20 years, such activities as my personal experience plus utilizing international best practices. Again, I see we have even more people in the chat. I'd appreciate if you could write what your job is. Please write your position. Some of you are already in charge of recruitment. Some of you work in recruitment. Some of you work in HR. Don't be shy, write in the chat. It will be useful and interesting. Well, I'll continue and tell you about the homework. So, this course has 13 lessons and homework assignments. Completing all homework assignments will allow you to receive our diploma, but the homework assignments must be accepted and must be done by you, not by ChatGPT. You'll be able to add this credential to your LinkedIn profile. We issue the diploma on a top platform. It's the Accredi platform. The world is moving towards having all diplomas on one platform, where they will be checked and verified, eliminating fakes and forgeries. This course consists of 13 sessions. 5 of them will be available as recordings, while 8 will be conducted live, similar to how we're communicating now. Today we'll discuss the recruiting system audit checklist, employer brand audit, recruiter assessment checklist, and recruiting metrics audit. This will help you determine where you currently stand. In other words, what's your starting point? What you still need to build and what you already have. Alright, so the recruiting system checklist involves analyzing whether all elements of the recruiting system are present in the company. There's a model called the modern talent acquisition system in companies. I mentioned that I rely on global best practices from various organizations, consulting firms, and research institutions. They publish different models, systems, and competency frameworks. And this represents the current global understanding of what recruiting looks like. We can see here that recruiting is actually a narrower concept than a talent acquisition system, because the talent acquisition system also includes employer branding, candidate management, automation, stakeholder relationships, metrics, planning, and so on. Accordingly, our course is built around the entire system, and our audit covers all elements. So, how does the recruiting system audit checklist work? You have two options. At the beginning of the class, I mentioned that we've updated this course, and now it has some additional features. The first option is in the form of a Google document, where you can go and complete the checklist. The second is the PPHR platform, which I developed this year, and where I've transferred several checklists. You can register on this platform. Now I'll show you what it looks like. No, that's not it. I need to log in, not as an administrator right now. So, you can register. I've already registered here, so I have a login. There's a choice of languages. You can choose English, Ukrainian, or Russian, and the platform will load. You have a series of checklists. I've already filled this out. You'll have an audit checklist for the recruiting system. Here's the checklist. You click on it, and it will prompt you to complete it. You can change the language. The language you selected during registration will be displayed, and here there are various audit points. If I scroll down, you'll see that there are many different items. You can click yes or no accordingly. Yes or no. Yes or no. And when you've filled everything out at the end, you click finish. If you haven't filled something in, the system will tell you that you've forgotten to answer some questions. I hope you'll complete it. And you'll get a report that says, in my case, it says my system is 1% efficient. That means it still needs improvement. Well, you'll have your own result. But besides this, you'll also get advice. There will be recommendations for each item you didn't select, suggesting what to do about it. You can expand it, and there will also be a hint, and we've added artificial intelligence here. For example, if you don't understand what something means, you click here and get hints generated by artificial intelligence. So you click. If no one has clicked this button before you, the artificial intelligence will generate a response, and you'll need to wait. And if someone else has clicked the button before you, the artificial intelligence response will appear immediately. The system remembers the answer and doesn't generate it again. That's how it works. On your main page, you'll also see the results of this checklist, so whenever you log into the PPR system, you'll always see what it looks like on the home page. For example, here I've filled out many checklists, so I'm getting information from many checklists, but you'll have information from just one. Although you can fill out all the checklists, there are many here. More will be added. It's all free. This is primarily done for the Academy, but there's no charge for using this tool, so that's one option. Now let's look at what the recruiting system audit checklist consists of, what we need to think about in general, what we need to check. The checklist itself is made up of sections, all synchronized with this system here. There are about 15 items here for review, I guess. They're all on the checklist. For each of these 15 items, there's a list of 3 to 10 points, for example, and there's a description of exactly what each item entails. So you read through all of this and look at it. For example, employer branding is one element of the system. And it mentions internal EVP research, and you read the description. It states that an internal study was conducted on the importance of EVP factors for employees and their level of satisfaction. If you've done this in your company and this description applies to you, you check the box. Yes, it is. If you didn't do it, if it's not true about you, you check the box. If it's not true about you, you leave it blank. If you use a Google Doc, you just leave it blank. So for you, that means it has to go on the action list. I mean, you have to do it. Then it will be considered that you did it. Well, I'm showing as an example, there's engagement, there's search, there's sourcing. What you'll see here is that this checklist is a collection of best practices, best tools, best approaches. And if you implement all of them in your company, you will build quite a progressive system. It will be able to tackle a wide variety of tasks imaginable. Well, again, this is based on research as well as my personal experience. I mean, when I was building out recruiting systems, it's a case of several times. It was STB TV channel, it was Pritula Company, it was IDELS Company. Well, I personally did some recruiting at Alpha Bank. I didn't build into the system. Rather, I built my work. I organized for myself without being a leader. I didn't do anything for other people. But learning recruiting, learning this profession, and improving my work for myself, there is something we do. I also implemented a lot of things. These are some of the things I passed on to other recruiters. Well, that's the audit sections. That's what you'll need to do. We also have an employer brand audit checklist here. That is, we are not only evaluating employer brand activity, we are evaluating the employer brand itself. And that's where this point comes in. In some companies, the head of Recul is responsible for the employer brand. So it has that authority, budget, and can build a brand. In some companies, a different person is responsible for the employer brand. That is, some employer brand executive or employer brand managers. Accordingly, here you will need to figure out how you will do it. That is, either on your own or with the involvement of that person. Either way, the employer brand of the company determines the success of your job. That is, the stronger the brand, the easier it will be for your team to work. Well, vice versa, the weaker the brand, the more effort will be required. Also in this checklist, this is the part right here, it's only in the Google Docs option. I'll show you again where Google Docs are available. So it is only checklist audits of the recruiting system that can be done in HR. And additional tools are available in Google Docs. I'm going to open it up now, show you what it's going to look like. It looks like this. So we have the first tab, it's duplicated, and what's the plus on PH? There's a recommendation there. And these are these things: VP audits, recruiting strategy, which we'll talk about later, recruiter assessment, candidate persona description, journey map, and sales pitches. They are only in this field. This file will be available in your personal account for course participants under the video. So there's a video in my personal account, there's a presentation at the bottom, you can download that presentation, go to the link, and open that document. So what do we have here? There's a recruiter's evaluation checklist. It involves assessing competency, and it involves recruiters filling out this checklist on their own. It's important. Please don't treat this as evaluation for the sake of dismissal or bonus pay. It's evaluation for the sake of development. That's why it's important to understand your recruiting team, what they know, what they don't know, and they need to learn. Because obviously the success of the system depends on the recruiter's knowledge. That is, you can implement the most innovative recruiting solutions, some recruiting platforms, you can develop cool tools, cool templates. But if your team has such modest recruiting knowledge, there's simply no one to utilize it all. So you'll have beautiful templates, beautiful processes, beautiful documents, and recruiters who do everything hands-on. It's like having, I don't know what kind of farm, with some cool combines, equipment, robots, and so on, but doing everything with shovels and watering everything with sprinklers. On the skill of the team greatly, that depends. Next, when we did the recruiting system audit in terms of processes and the team knowledge audit, it was time to look at metrics. I mean, any recruiting executive, he works, well, or she does, with an indicator, because indicators are what represent the results of the system at a given moment. It's also very important. And processes are important because processes lead to some kind of metrics, and metrics are important because they reflect how processes work. Here's a list of the main indicators, and we'll break them down in more detail next. So what a set of metrics looks like. The indicator has a name such as cost by us. There is a formula for how this is calculated so that you can do the math in case you haven't come across it. And there's a landmark. The benchmark is what I set based on either my personal experience, either of the studies that I've seen, or this study, or somewhere some other people have shared their experiences. So it's basically based on all this information that I have, in what ranges this metric should be. For example, the cost of hiring one candidate in a company usually equates to 1 to 2 salaries for 1 month of that candidate. So, for example, if your company hires people with an average salary of $1,000, your cost per hire should be around $1,000 to $2,000 per candidate. Next, the time to fill a vacancy, 30 to 60 days, depending on the company size. There are many studies proving that the larger the company, for example over 1,000 employees, the longer the time to fill. So for companies with over 1,000 employees, it's already somewhere between 45 to 60 days. If the company is small, with less than 1,000 employees, the time to fill will be closer to 25 to 35 days. Obviously, processes slow down and get delayed in large companies, some bureaucracy appears, so the metrics are different. Average candidate score. This comes into play when you implement formal candidate assessment based on a score. SCOCA is a candidate scorecard. Here I've shown the benchmark I had. It all depends, of course, on what scale you use and what grading principles you apply, because there are different approaches. Some only hire employees if they got all A's on the scorecard, while others hire employees even if they got all C's, so it depends on how critical the assessment is. For example, when we implemented scorecards at STB TV channel, we started with an average score for all candidates around 3 to 3.5 and reached 4.5. But there we hired people who got almost all A's according to our scorecards. That is, we tried to show the hiring manager candidates that were at least half hireable, meaning half of them got A's from the hiring manager, half got B's, which averages to 4.5. Next is hiring manager satisfaction. This is also very important. And it's actually, besides being a metric, very useful information for the recruiting manager's work, because it allows evaluating not only the performance of the recruiters themselves, but also satisfaction. Because satisfaction is a precursor to results. That is, if the hiring manager is satisfied, a constructive relationship is built, and the work goes well. And if the hiring manager is dissatisfied, then there will be problems with the results. Plus, it gives you the opportunity to assess what should be changed in the recruiter's behavior. Plus, it allows you to understand which hiring managers and which recruiters have difficulties between them. For example, I implemented such a system on STB TV channel. I conducted a satisfaction assessment about once every 6 months, and I saw that I had a recruiter, for example, recruiter Elena. She has up to 10 hiring managers. Let's say her average grade is 4.5, but one hiring manager gave her an average grade of C, while the others gave good grades. So there's something wrong with the relationship with this hiring manager. So we meet and discuss, and maybe this hiring manager is just not comfortable working with this recruiter, and it's better to switch, which we generally did. Plus, when this assessment is done, different parameters are usually evaluated, so you can draw the recruiter's attention to some specific things, such as communication. That is, a recruiter can do well overall, but communicate poorly. For example, not informing in a timely manner. Let's have a little information about the candidate. Based on such an assessment, you can recognize this and say, "Dear recruiter, let's pay attention to this indicator, to how you inform the hiring manager, and try to improve this assessment. Percentage of those who pass the probationary period. Your company's probationary period should not become part of the evaluation system, as it sometimes happens. That is, the probationary period is not an extension of the evaluation. You shouldn't take people on probation if you have doubts about them, to later figure out if they're suitable or not. You should clearly decide whether people are right for you or not before the probationary period, before you hire them. So the probationary period is purely for some aspects that you couldn't accurately assess before hiring that may show up later. Accordingly, 19 out of 20 people should successfully pass the probationary period. The same applies after the probationary period. 19 out of 20 passed their probation, and 18 of those 19 worked for at least a year. Next. This one's for the advanced. When we evaluate candidates, we rarely think about it, but we are making a prediction. That is, candidate evaluations are nothing more than predictions. Predictions of their future work effectiveness. And these predictions have accuracy, either high or low. This accuracy is very easy to measure. It can be measured by calculating the correlation. If you've implemented a scorecard for candidates, assigning points, that is, you apply some assessment tools and assign scores. And if the company has, for example, a performance evaluation of employees at the end of the year, you can compare the candidates' scores to the performance results and calculate the correlation to understand which assessment tools give you high correlation, which give you low correlation, and discard the latter. So the overall correlation should be pretty good. Well, you can't build a perfect prediction, but even a 65% correlation would be good enough. Next is the efficiency of search channels. The head of recruiting analyzes which search channels are being used. This is important for them. Their search channels are the supply channels of a certain resource. And the manager should, first of all, draw the team's attention to new channels. For example, When I worked at the STB TV channel, we had been filling the same positions for many years. We had different vacancies, of course, but there were positions we were constantly filling. We had 200 camera operators on the TV channel who film with cameras, 150 lighting technicians, 150 directors, screenwriters, about 150 journalists. So there were several positions that we had many of. Well, accordingly, when you have these permanent vacancies, you fill them year after year. I worked at the STB TV channel for 4.5 years, and obviously after the first year of work, the standard channels were exhausted. The recruiters were saying, we've looked through all the websites, job sites, reviewed everyone. And I believed them, because when you need to find 10 directors every month, obviously a team of 10 recruiters will review everything they can find on any sites. So we had to come up with new channels, which is basically what we did with the team. Once again, when faced with a hiring challenge, we sat down and thought, okay, where else can we look? What else could it be? For example, we can look in other cities. We even traveled to other countries. We looked at some industries that were new to us. That was channel analysis. You need to do this. You need to understand where people are coming to you from, where they're not coming from. The same applies in terms of quality. There are some channels that generate a lot of responses for you. But you realize that this is what is known as noise spam. You're getting resumes from completely irrelevant people. That is, some website, for example, is either poorly built itself, or it has that kind of audience. You posted a job opening for a director and you got applications from anyone. Janitors, drivers, locksmiths, electricians, plumbers, just not directors. You get a lot of responses to the job posting, but few results overall. So, there was a question from the audience. Does the course address the issue of hiring specifically top managers? Look, this course isn't about hiring, it's a course about building a recruiting system. If you're interested in hiring top managers, there's a course called Headhunting and Executive Search, which is exactly about how to hire them. So this course doesn't teach you how to hire someone. The course teaches you how to build a hiring system, and the hiring system covers all positions from mass vacancies like janitors and drivers to top managers, because it's about how to form a team of recruiters, how to manage them, how to train them, how to motivate them, what tools to implement, what processes to describe, what metrics to implement, and so on. So the answer to your question is, if you need to learn how to hire top managers and you're a recruiter, then you need the Headhunting and Executive Search course. If you're a recruiting manager and you need to improve the quality of hiring top managers, this course will suit you because you need to build a system that will help you hire everyone from janitors to top managers. Next, the conversion rate within the funnel. This is something you need to know how to work with. We'll be talking about this in the class about coaching the recruiting team. You need to analyze the funnel, you need to understand the conversion rate. And in the funnel analysis, you'll see where you have problems, and this will allow you to analyze why they're there. Next, the percentage of internal hires. This is an important point for various reasons. Well, to be honest, for a recruiting manager, it doesn't really matter what percentage of hires are internal, because for a recruiting manager, the result is what matters. But the percentage of internal hires is important for the company. And the percentage of internal hires is important for the HR director who is building the HR system, of which the recruiting system is a part. So here the head of recruiting acts as an HR business partner for the HR director and the company, and does something good, not only for themselves but also for others. That's why they set up internal hires. But on the other hand, internal hires will also partly benefit the recruiting manager themselves, because they will save them in the most difficult moments. Let me give you an example. Working at the STP TV channel, imagine we were filling about 100 vacancies a month. So in a year we filled 1,200 vacancies. I worked there for 4 years, and my team and I filled about 8,000 vacancies. That's a huge number of people to find somewhere. Some people we found easily, some with moderate difficulty, some were hard to find, and some people we couldn't find at all. For example, we always had difficulty finding project managers, chief directors, chief script writers. These people simply weren't available in the market, and those who were didn't suit us. And that's where internal hires saved us. That is, by getting the company, hiring managers, top executives, and the employees themselves accustomed to the fact that we, as a team of recruiters, would look inside the company to find people, we were able to fill vacancies. For instance, when once again we couldn't find another head scriptwriter, head director, and project manager for a new television program. And even when we tried an internal competition and no one responded, or those who did respond weren't suitable. But the company was ready, so this time we did the following. We approached top management and said, "We have an idea how we can fill these vacancies, but we need your support." A good benchmark is 30%. Average number of candidates at the top of the funnel. It's very simple here. This is where pure statistics work. In my experience of 20 years in recruiting, I've seen that the more candidates, let's say relevant candidates, are added to the vacancy through collecting applications, through the recruiter's own candidate search, the more quality candidates you get at the output, the higher the chances of hiring someone. That's why, starting and continuing at Idle, as a rector I set a goal. You must add 300 candidates at the top of the funnel. For this, recruiters were trained in sourcing, so they could not only wait for good candidates, but also find them independently on various resources. And we provided automation tools that allowed them to effectively communicate with a large number of candidates quickly. When we achieved this indicator of 300 candidates, our clients were super satisfied with the hires. They realized that the candidates could be of a fundamentally different level from what they were used to seeing. Average speed of candidates passing through the funnel. Your recruiting system should be effective, not only in terms of proper good processes, but also in terms of speed. There shouldn't be any hiccups or delays that lead to you first contacting a candidate on day one and reaching the job offer stage in 50, 60, 90 days or 6 months. I'm sure in your practice there have been times when negotiations with a candidate lasted 6 months before hiring. This should only happen as an exception. Most people aren't willing to wait that long. It's ineffective. It doesn't lead to anything good. Even Google at some point analyzed that they were spending too many days on the entire hiring process. They set a goal to reduce it by 2.5 times, decrease the hiring speed, didn't lose quality, and efficiency improved significantly. Next, the response rate to the first contact. You need to work on this too. Here, of course, the sales skills of recruiters play a large role. We have a course on sales and recruiting. I don't know which cohort is going through it now, probably the 10th. All recruiters have the same problem. Standard, unappealing texts. As soon as they take our course and adopt our methods, their candidate response rate increases dramatically. Often, even while doing homework, they write that they finally filled vacancies. Finally, a candidate who had been unresponsive for a long time became interested, and so on. This really has a strong impact. Well, and accordingly, how to measure it? What percentage responds even to the first contact? Because if you've written 100 messages on LinkedIn for your first contact and only 10 people responded, it means you don't know how to sell. This means you'll have problems with the second and third contacts, during interviews, and so on. It should be 40% here. And responded doesn't mean they said, "Yes, we want to work for you, let's have an interview right away." No, it means they responded adequately. For example, in my pre-applied teams, we perfected our text to such an extent. I even had a girl. It was pure luck. We were hiring an assistant for the team and chat, and we got a girl with a marketing degree who had graduated from some top French university, and she also had a gift for writing. When we saw that, well, we asked her to write some internal announcements. She wrote these announcements so well that we said, "Listen," her name was Katya. "Katya, rewrite our job postings for us. Katya, rewrite our candidate contact text for us." She nailed perfect English because she was in France, apparently studying in English, and she definitely knew French and English. So the English texts were improving. When she was rewriting our job postings, we got a lot of messages from candidates saying things like, "I'm not interested right now, but you have such a great job opening. You wrote them so well, I wish I was interested." That's how it should be. Then we developed all these techniques, by the way, and later she was hired as a copywriter. I should check if she's still working there or not. Anyway, we learned to write the same way for our teams. And as for me, first, I transferred knowledge from my previous job, and second, another colleague moved with me. We carried all of that over, and we were constantly getting messages saying, "Wow, your texts are so great." Next up is the job offer acceptance rate. I spent my whole career in recruiting thinking that job offers were mostly accepted. That's how it was for me at Alpha Bank when I worked as a recruiter. That's how it was at the STB TV channel. I mean, when someone didn't accept a job offer, we would analyze it with the recruiters. We would sit down and discuss it. Why didn't they accept the job offer? It's strange, it's not normal. And then I accidentally found out that some companies have job offer acceptance rates of 10 or 30%. It was so shocking to me. I thought, why do they make so many attempts? Why do they make offers to those who reject them? You know, it's like building a relationship and proposing marriage, and 90% of the time you're turned down. What are you doing wrong? It's the same here. That is, most likely, it's an inability to assess a candidate's motivation and an inability to sell. You can see that this indicator, the percentage of candidates who make it to the interview, is also largely a sales skill. Again, not from my experience, but I discovered a concept they call ghosting. It's when candidates disappear. I just heard about it from others. For me, this was also shocking. How is it that candidates don't show up for interviews? At one time, it was a personal insult to me. If someone didn't show up for my interview, I was very surprised and would call them. Like, how is this possible? We had already agreed. Then I found out that for many companies, it's a common situation where almost half don't show up. But again, this depends on the recruiter. Average number of closed vacancies per recruiter per month. It's important to look at who's working, who's closing vacancies. Because if you have 5 recruiters, and one of the recruiters is closing jobs at half the rate of the others, all other things being equal, then that creates problems for you. It will fall on your shoulders, and you'll have to deal with it yourself. You might even have to search for candidates yourself for future managers. So this needs to be analyzed. You need to understand that vacancies vary in complexity. So here I proposed a formula where we estimate the complexity of the vacancy by the salary size, which generally makes sense. The more highly paid an employee is, the more difficult it is to fill that vacancy. Staffing fill rate is an important metric for the head of recruiting. Again, I guess as an HR business partner, for the business, for their own. Because it's important to understand that if the head of recruiting couldn't achieve 90% occupancy, then the business will suffer. The average search period for open vacancies helps to analyze problematic vacancies, to see which vacancies are taking longer than required. And the average percentage of vacancies, or simply the percentage of vacancies that have already exceeded the standard time frame. For example, when I was the head of recruiting at the STB TV channel, we closed 100 vacancies a month and managed about 200 vacancies simultaneously. I was always interested in all the vacancies that we were working on beyond the standard time frame. For instance, if we handled almost all vacancies within no more than 60 days, I would sit down every week, look at vacancies with a lead time of more than 60 days, and constantly analyze with the recruiter what we could do, what we needed to change, what our problem was, and so on. Because the hiring managers were not happy. There was some talk about inefficiency in our work. So you need to analyze. The same goes for assessment. A recruiting manager can evaluate their recruiting by processes, which is auditing, by indicators, which are metrics, and by how they lead. That is, a good recruiting manager cares about how they lead. For example, when I was the head of recruiting at the STB TV channel, it was my first serious leadership experience. While working at Alpha Bank, I wasn't a manager, but I coordinated the work of other recruiters. So, for example, a lot of vacancies came to me. I distributed them among recruiters. I collected reports from them, asked how they were doing. And if I saw that I could help in some way, I tried to help, but I wasn't in charge of them. After Alpha Bank, I worked for a year at Marcom, a little-known company, and there I first hired one recruiter, then a second recruiter. Then I inherited the HR team of a subsidiary business. But we were more like colleagues, sort of friends, so there wasn't full-fledged leadership. At the STB TV channel, I was already a full-fledged manager. The number of people under me increased to about 10. It got me thinking about how I lead. I mean, I didn't know how to lead. I was never trained for it, but I needed to lead. I started thinking, I started reading books. I began asking my own supervisor for advice. And, by the way, that's when I took a coaching course because coaching-style leadership was becoming popular at that time. Google, by the way. We're not going to talk about it right now. For them, coaching-style leadership is a fundamental principle of leadership. And by taking a coaching course, I developed this leadership skill in myself, which I then used to effectively manage teams and build very warm, trusting relationships, so much so that these same team members wanted to work with me again in other companies. I think for a manager, that's the main indicator. When you leave, people want to work with you at another company. Yes, they liked it so much they realized it was effective that they responded and even asked to work with you again. So, in order to evaluate how you lead, you can use the competency model that Google has developed, and the assessment based on that model that Google has created. Google has a list of 10 competencies that their executives should possess. There they are on the screen. And there's a questionnaire that is sent to employees to evaluate their manager. So my recommendation to you is that it may feel unfamiliar, it may even be scary, but try to overcome that feeling, create a questionnaire and send it to your team. In Google Docs, or rather Google Forms, there's a ready-made questionnaire for you. You can copy it and send it to your team with a request to fill it out. Anonymously, of course. And see which areas you didn't score so well in and work on them over the next 6 months. Then repeat the survey. Well, this is an example of a report showing how Google presents results to managers. Homework for those on the course. Conduct a recruiting audit, prepare files and send a link to your file. Just make sure to grant access to it. And please add a few comments with your conclusions. Either on the platform, go through the recruiting system audit checklist, send a link to your report by copying it from the address bar, and also include a few of your thoughts about what you observed. Books to recommend. Well, first of all, one book on recruiting. The author of this book didn't invent recruiting or anything new in recruiting. The author of this book collected best practices, processed them through his own experience, and published a book sharing insights with other entrepreneurs. And the second book is about business, about how challenging it is to build a business. It's very important for a recruiting manager to understand this business component. What's next? Next, we'll have a live session in 1 week where we'll discuss workforce planning and developing a recruiting strategy. Then there will be 3 recorded classes. These will cover employer branding, HR marketing, and referral programs. Then we'll have another live session on forming a team of recruiters and coaching the recruiting team. There will be another recorded session on one-on-one meetings with recruiters and managing job funnels and analytics in recruiting. Then we'll have another live session on implementing an automation system. We'll talk about modern automation tools, launching sourcing. Then there will be a session on how to describe processes, followed by a session on compensation programming and motivation, and the last one on reporting and working with clients. This is what the program for this course looks like. I invite you to take this course, not only to gain knowledge, but also to earn a diploma. For those already in the course, we'll see you in 1 week. To everyone else, thank you for being with me online and see you soon. Bye-bye.